Now, without any further delay, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Grant Earl. Grant, you now have the floor.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Scott. And like you said, this is user adoption in SharePoint 2010, and we're going to discuss some strategies and lessons learned and ways to help you promote SharePoint 2010 within your organization and maintain a high level of user adoption. My name is Grant Earl, and I'm the Regional Practice Director for Portals and Collaboration here in Southern California for Neudesic. Today's agenda, we'll just run through a brief introduction of who Neudesic is. We'll talk about why is user adoption important, specifically with regards to SharePoint. We'll talk about some strategies that work and some that don't. And then we'll specifically dive into how SharePoint 2010 can help you achieve these goals. And we'll have some Q&A and wrap up. But before we do anything, today is kind of a special day in the SharePoint world. May 12, 2010 is the official launch date for SharePoint 2010. It's been a highly anticipated product launch for Microsoft and for all of us in the Microsoft partner community, so we're really excited today. You can see all the events, including live webcasts, and get the most up-to-date information from the official launch site. And then there's also the launch wiki. But please, don't go there until after this webcast. So who is Neudesic? Neudesic is a Microsoft Gold Certified and National Systems Integrator partner, and we have 14 offices nationwide as well as an international presence, and we cover basically the entire Microsoft stack. So any technology that Microsoft has, we provide services for, and we're exclusively Microsoft. We have over 400 customers, and approximately 12 new customers are added each month. We provide solutions across different industries and verticals, including media and entertainment, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, high-tech, manufacturing, financial services, etc. We've sustained growth year over year since our founding in 2001, and we're based here in Irvine, California. We have a great story around SharePoint. We've been working with the technology since version 1, and some of our team actually comes from Microsoft, from the SharePoint team, so we have deep experience in SharePoint and a great relationship with Microsoft and the SharePoint team. What you're seeing now are some of the intranet and extranet SharePoint site examples that we've built, and we actually host a lot of these for Microsoft, including the Microsoft Partner Network, the Microsoft Education Partner Network, and some of the various other SharePoint sites out there. So why SharePoint? How is SharePoint going to help you in your business? Ownership of the site. There's less of a dependence on IT, so your individual business units can maintain and administer their own presence on the internet or the intranet. Consolidation of unstructured data. This is one of my favorite features of SharePoint. Taking that data, be it a file share, a line of business application, or some other disparate system, and unifying all that data underneath the umbrella of SharePoint. You get a high degree of out-of-the-box functionality. It's very powerful. SharePoint provides a single platform for your intranet, extranet, and intranet sites. There are built-in workflows for content authoring, and there's tight integration with Microsoft Office, specifically Outlook. So a common scenario we've seen is people come to us and say, hey, I've just installed SharePoint, not 2010 quite yet, but nobody's using it. The people that we're attempting to empower, help, and educate have rejected it. Help. So what is So what doesn't work? How do we reach this broken situation where there's no user adoption? The build it and they will come theory. If someone in IT says, oh, well, I think we can build this great workflow that I'm pretty sure people will use, and let's roll it out and hopefully they will. No, that almost never works. So maybe a couple of specialized users might jump on that bandwagon, but if you don't do the proper research and planning, that's not a good strategy for adoption. The complete change or shock and awe theory. Taking your existing intranet, for example, and completely blowing it away and introducing an entirely new look and feel and completely new functionality. Just shoving people into that freezing cold water of a new system, that will not inspire user adoption. Forgetting to ask, how do people work? How do people use their current systems today? How do they need to do their jobs? How are they comfortable working? Training. Training can be defined in many different ways. One thing that most users dislike quite a bit, we've found, is links to static pages on the intranet. So creating a mandate that says, everyone read these 18 pages of documentation, that's not going to work. Forgetting to keep content up to date. This is probably one of the most challenging ones for many organizations. If you haven't fulfilled content management roles prior to your launch, chances are within about 6 months, everything that's on that page for the launch date is going to remain there. And it's going to create a very stale experience, and no one's going to be really inspired or need to go back to your SharePoint site because they already know exactly what's there and probably don't need to revisit it. So the importance of user adoption. I found this survey, and it shows what the most important factors for realizing software value are. As you can see, functionality is a very small fraction of that pie, whereas user adoption, that's almost 3/4 of the importance. Process alignment and organizational change are smaller factors, but clearly user adoption is critical. So now let's just talk about what works. Some strategies that we've compiled. Number one, inform and educate. So long before you roll SharePoint out, plant the seed. Plant the seed of what SharePoint is, what this new system is going to be, what it's going to do, how it's going to help the everyday user do their jobs better. Start a campaign. There's this great tool out there called the SharePoint Internal Buzz Kit. And what that is, it basically lets you start an internal marketing campaign that informs the user about what SharePoint is, and it gives you a step-by-step process to help your user community understand how it's going to fit into their lives and make their workday go by a bit easier. Finally, identifying and introducing champions within each department. So HR, legal, IT, everyone should have their own champion. So once you empower these champions with this knowledge, they can go back to their different business units and create a grassroots campaign within and and begin the education process from within. What works number 2, design. Begin incorporating design and user experience into the process at a very early stage. So identifying what individual versus group norms are. How does an individual spend their day versus how a team spends their day? Identify use cases, business scenarios, and processes within each business department. One other way this can be achieved is by identifying one business unit to have for a proof of concept. So instead of rolling it out to the entire company at day 1, why not just build a proof of concept using one business unit? HR, for example, is a great place to start because HR has many of the pieces of functionality, forms that users need. So a vacation request, PTO, sick leave, modifying the benefits, things like that. Everyone's going to be interested in that, and everyone's going to need that. So that's a great business unit to start with. Usability testing. So once you've designed some of the workflows, once you've designed some of your wireframes, make sure that these are valid designs by conducting usability testing via focus groups. And finally, designing some policies so that users, so there's a mandate to use these systems. So it's one thing to talk about it, but if you don't necessarily mandate that they be used, people can always revert back to how they've always done things and the status quo. Number 3, training. So on a pre- and post-rollout basis, there should be some training. Broad-based training. So this is getting an auditorium full of people or a classroom full of people and disseminating the information to as many users as possible, getting the broad concepts out there. And then once that's complete, individual training. So users with interest or champions that you identify, provide them with some additional one-on-one training. So like we touched on before, these people can then trigger a grassroots campaign and grassroots information dissemination so that these individual trainees become trainers within the user community. So number 4, freshness. Keep the content new and topical. So this is about what we talked about earlier with identifying content managers to maintain the content, keep it fresh, like a spring daisy. And then conducting periodic focus groups to examine ongoing usage of the system. So just because it works today doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work in 6 months due to changing processes and the dynamic natures of most businesses. So make sure that you take a look at that periodically. What works number 5? Measure, share, and promote. So out of the box, SharePoint comes with many different reports. Some of the most important are site usage and search usage, even query reports. So what are the users using within the site? Where are they going? What are some of the queries that they're typing in their search? And what are the results that they're getting back for those queries? SharePoint can help you identify those right out of the box. So based on that, you can see the content paths that are working and those that aren't, and update your navigation accordingly, update the flow of the site accordingly, and update your information taxonomy accordingly. User feedback is also very important, be it directly solicited. You can come up with some success stories or stories of failure where it's not working. And why not use SharePoint to create a handy survey and solicit feedback that way. And then always promoting what other problems SharePoint can solve. So you as the administrator or the champion of SharePoint within your organization need to keep asking yourself that question: what other business problems and challenges can SharePoint solve? And then presenting that to the business, keeping SharePoint on top of the newest business challenges. One thing that should be taken away from this, and probably the most important thing, is that user adoption is a process. It's not an event. It isn't like lightning striking where it happens once in one place. It's a process that's constantly taking place and evolving throughout the organization. So continue to, from prior to the inception of the project to 2 years afterwards, keep on the user adoption bandwagon. So user adoption strategy. This is probably the most boring slide I have, unfortunately. But strategy should identify the purpose of the solution. By rolling out SharePoint, what am I going to do? Identify key objectives of the solution. What is this solution going to solve? The scope of the user adoption strategy. Key objectives of the user adoption strategy. What the future vision of the user adoption strategy is. How is this going to work beyond tomorrow? What are the assumptions, constraints, and dependencies of this strategy? And let's look at risks. And planning for user adoption is going to require a roadmap, which we'll talk about shortly. Investment in user adoption. How are these strategies going to be funded? How are we going to fund this training? Measuring success of these user adoption initiatives. This is part of polling users with surveys and direct feedback. So as part of your strategy, you need a user adoption roadmap. Plan out how you're going to achieve user adoption. So pre-deployment, we like to perform audience analysis, interview stakeholders and key users, keep them involved throughout the solution design, design the solution specifically for user adoption. That goes back to what works, number one, back to design. User acceptance testing involvement. So, like I mentioned earlier, if you design something but haven't tested it, chances are it's probably not going to work for all of your users. Creating training plan and delivery plan, and a communication strategy to really get the word out there. Day one, launch day initiatives. Communicate that the solution has launched. This seems like an obvious thing to do. Targeted training and coaching, identifying those champions, identifying power users, business champions, and IT champions. So after day one, ongoing initiatives, creating feedback channels for users, making sure there's a vibrant user community, follow-up training and coaching, an initiation program for new users of the solution, new employees that weren't there necessarily for the launch, going back to an analysis of user behavior, and then refining and enhancing the processes and the solution based on feedback and understanding of user behavior. So compiling all of this feedback and all of this research you've done into the ongoing operations of the system, and then modifying it. When should you start to develop this strategy? Immediately. If you're thinking about rolling out SharePoint, or if you've already rolled it out without doing user adoption planning, this is something that you should start to do immediately. But before you do that, just go back and make sure you understand the context of the solution. And this includes a clear understanding of the project goals, objectives, and the scope. And then make sure that everyone, not just you, is committed to the delivery of this project, so everyone in your project team. Understand the people who will interact with the solution. Who is the users? Who are the users? Who are the administrators? Whose lives will be impacted by the solution? Understand what's going to be delivered by the solution. So is it disparate, unstructured content throughout your organization? What is it? So how does SharePoint 2010 help? SharePoint 2010 helps in that there's a very familiar UI via the Office ribbon, something that's been out there since Office 2007 launched. So this helps to ease users into it. So if they've used Office 2007 and SharePoint 2010 is out there, it'll be a nice familiar UI. Familiar applications. So this screenshot shows Excel Mobile. We've got Word Mobile. And we've got OneNote Mobile. So all of the familiar Office applications are available not only in a full, rich client experience, but also in a browser-based experience, and then as well as a mobile device experience. So users can feel comfortable accessing their content in SharePoint on any number of different devices. So it's really a pervasive experience, no matter what you design. And then under the covers for your developers, SharePoint uses industry standards like XHTML. It has full web accessibility compliance. And then from a technological standpoint, a lot of the Web 2.0 standards that are out there, including Silverlight, Ajax, et cetera. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Let's review some of the links that I presented earlier. The SharePoint internal buzz kit, if you're looking at rolling out SharePoint and need to educate your user community, I encourage that you download and use this. The official launch site for SharePoint in 2010, you can go check that out today. There's a live webcast going on right now. And the SP Launch Wiki also shows a lot of resources. I am Grant Earl at Neudesic.com, and you can check out our offerings at www.neudesic.com. And I encourage some questions, which I will have answers for. So please type your questions in the Q&A area at the top of the screen. I'll be happy to answer. All right, I see some questions here. Is the Buzz Kit going to be updated for 2010? Yes, it is. Most of the materials out there can still be used for 2007 or for 2010. So it was designed for 2007. You should be able to use about 75% of the content out there. What it's going to be lacking are some of the new technologies like the Office web apps, access services, Visio services, some of the new service applications. However, the general information is very sound, so I recommend that you use that. Thank you, Graham, for that question. All right. Go to Doris, who says, please put the last slide back up. Certainly. Put all the links on it. Andy Wu asks, where can I get a copy of this recording? Well, Andy, This will be available on the web, either via Neudesic's website or and we send the recording out actually after the webcast is complete within I think about 48 hours. No, there is no demo, Jason. I'm sorry. Demonstrating user adoption, a little bit difficult. All right, Scott is asking, let's see here. Scott is asking, how do you use the SharePoint tools and reports for identifying key users for more or deeper training? Well, the SharePoint out-of-the-box reports do not identify individual users. Identifying key users are that's something that you'll probably do during your analysis phase. Identifying user paths is probably what's more important when you're looking at usage reports. So where are my users going the most frequently? What processes are they acting on? And how can I optimize the paths to these key processes and this key information? As far as identifying the key users for more or deeper training, that's probably something you need to identify during the analysis phase. So who are your power users within HR, legal, IT, marketing, and who are the people that conduct mission-critical workflows and processes today? Bruce asks, can you send us a copy of all of your slides? Yes, we will send a copy of the slides, or you can print them out. Scott can instruct you how to print those out. Any other questions out there? Oh, Andy has another question. Andy asks, is there a limit of 2 gigabyte size for any single file in the repository in SharePoint 2010? While there's no hard limit, you definitely don't want to upload a file this size directly to your SharePoint database. This is something better kept in a file share, and then you can index that, or SharePoint gives you the option to store remote blobs or external blob storage via SQL 2008. So that's one of the powerful capabilities. But if you start filling up your database with files this size, your management, your hardware costs, all these things are going to grow pretty rapidly. So we definitely don't recommend you put files this size into SharePoint. And this is something you can create a policy for when you're doing some of your planning and analysis before you roll out your solution. Betsy asks, you recommend that there is a full-time SharePoint adoption lead position. The company is about 6,000 users. While we don't recommend that there is a full-time adoption lead position, I think that every SharePoint initiative you have has a visible face to it, someone that can be contacted, general questions bounced off of, and I think that creating an effective internal marketing campaign can answer a lot of those questions, but someone definitely has to be pulling all the strings behind the scenes. So for each SharePoint initiative, we definitely recommend that you have someone in charge of that. But as far as a full-time person, no, I don't think that's necessary. What you will need from an administration side is at least one full-time SharePoint administrator. And some of our clients have up to 4 of those. Some just work in conjunction with their counterparts on the database and web teams. But there should be certainly at least one person dedicated to SharePoint administration. Okay. Any other questions out there? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you for listening this morning, and I appreciate your time. And I'll hand it back over to Scott.
Thanks, Grant. I'd like to remind everyone that you may print a PDF of today's slides by clicking Control-P. You can either print or save those slides locally for your convenience. You now have the opportunity to give us feedback by taking part in a few polls. Please select your answer by clicking the appropriate radio button next to the color that corresponds directly on the slide. Scott, was this content helpful for your business? Yes or no? We just got a few more seconds. I need about 12 more people to respond. Was this content helpful for your business? Just go ahead and click on the radio button directly on your slide. Okay, and please rate the presentation content. Was it excellent? Did you feel it was good? Did you feel it was poor? Great, great. Thank you so much for participating. Just need about 8 more people to click on the buttons, but please rate the presentation content. Excellent, good, or poor. Okay, and I have one final slide. Would you like Neudesic to schedule a follow-up? Yes or no? Okay, just a few more seconds. Just a few more of you. Great, thank you so much. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Grant Earl for presenting today, and thank everyone for attending today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's live meeting. You may disconnect from the audio portion of the event.